Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today we're doing the Steam chart video. So let's just get into it. So starting off, I'm just going to make this quick point. This video is done purely because I'm actually interested in this topic, and I do actually care about the game. But I do think it's also important that we have some general comprehension or understanding as to what the actual play counts are, and Bungie is not letting us know. At the same time, whilst people will happily throw around certain arguments of certain people, like for instance Paul Tassi and his somewhat infamous 70% of people are on PC thing, I guess the reality is there isn't really proper data backing that up. First and foremost, that is a insider source. In other words, that can be summarized to trust me, bro. I totally know somebody who's saying this. Which becomes a bit less. How do I say? This becomes a bit less believable when you're a guy who constantly makes negative content about Marathon and spends 99% of your time bagging out the game. Second of all, it has inconsistencies because Sony themselves are actually saying that Marathon's got decent retention. And finally, that data is 5 months old, even if it is correct at the time. So in 5 months' time, the data could shift. You could see that shift initially where you got majority of people on PC, but now you've dropped down to from that, let's say 88,000 players. If there's only 10,000 players on console, that puts you in a position where you might actually retain that 10,000 players on console, but at the flip side is you might actually find yourself in a position where it's close to that 50-50. Now, I'm just going to quickly explain the methodology here from what I've done. Basically, it's two forms. Form number one is basically I go into matches and I count the people I've queued with. I count the people I've been matched with, whether they've been console or PC. Now, obviously, I need to make this clear. I've done my best to avoid the double ups and misconsiderations of data. I try to keep people counted once and once only, but obviously, since I don't have an extensive database of everybody's names because I just couldn't be bothered writing that down, I'm not going to say it's 100% perfect. Second of all, obviously, since I'm a human, there is that key risk there, so I could misconsider or might consider people twice, or I might just forget to do matches, which is something I have done a few times where I've just gone an entire day without logging any matches down, and then I log like two matches in an entire day. It's been very hit or miss sometimes. That being said, though, I do think my data is fairly accurate, and it does meet several trends, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Basically, though, in a nutshell, first match, it's me and two other people, and then from there, there's only going to be two people considered because I'm not considering myself from that point on. Then, of course, we have this other form methodology, which is just the dad's marathon tally. Basically, in this, I got basically 59 people. I don't know why I didn't go for a 60th. And basically, yeah, I counted out what they are on, either PlayStation, Xbox, or PC. So if they're on PlayStation, Xbox, that's a tally in the console category. And if it's a PC, then it's in the PC category. Now, this leads into the actual data, which shows out 237 people. I have about 49% being on console and 50% being on PC. Now, obviously, there are some points here. I think I probably could have gone to a more even number, so let's say 240, which I think probably would have provided a better data set. But overall, I think it's pretty decent. It's not, I wouldn't say there's any gaping issues or flaws within my actual methodology itself. This of course leads into a bit of a question of really what exactly does this mean? What's this point to it? And this I think leads into a few of the things that Bungie themselves and Sony have been saying. Now, contrary to somebody or who has opinions on r slash marathon hate or whatever, no 70% of marathon players are probably not on PC. The reality is, like I've said before, I don't see the actual credibility behind that sort of argument because basically, in a nutshell, what's your source? Like, yeah, Paul Tassi probably knows some people, but are they involved in that sort of area? Do they actually have that level of knowledge? And I mean, this is the thing. He's a guy who has money to make from making negative content about Marathon. And since Sony made that release about actually the retention's not too bad, the reality is that, well, Bungie, he made a video claiming that Sony's outright lying. He didn't even consider the point that they might actually be somewhat correct. And this is where the problem sort of lies. It's like at the moment, if we look at that, we can go off this data. Marathon's current concurrent player counts are about six or so, six-ish to I'd say 7,000 players. Please put the funny meme in below. But that the reality is it's about 6 to 7,000 players on PC at the moment, meaning that with this data set, it would be about I'd say 6.8 thousand players overall on console. Now, this obviously leaves us with about, I would argue, about 14,000 maximum concurrent players. However, it does go beyond that. Obviously, concurrent players do not mean equal players, which means that people will just log on and off every now and again. Sometimes people just go into the main menu and just log off after a few minutes. And that is something people do, which means that your actual player count is most likely somewhere more in the middle. But for that reason, I would argue that the total player count would be about maximum minus minimum, which is currently about 2,000 players. So that sits around the 4,000 mark. Double that, so basically you're talking about 20,000 players per day. Now, obviously, that is me being throwing out ballpark figures. I'm not going to claim that this is 100% accurate, but I like to think that the middle ground is generally an idea of how many people are playing overall, because not everyone's online all the time. And you've got to keep in mind that the other side of this is also people need to sleep, people need to do other stuff. And the reality is that just to say that it's going to be the maximum at all times is, again, I just don't think that's logical to argue with. Now, this of course leads into Sony's argument that apparently the game is holding a consistent amount of players and has decent retention. And to which I would actually defend that. I would argue that the game is currently holding decent retention at the moment. The reason for this point is, in a nutshell, we pulled 40,000 players on Season 2. Keep in mind, Season 2's release was just Nightmarch and 2 guns and a new class. There wasn't a rework of Trial Archive. There wasn't anything particularly significant. It was just Nightmarch. And Nightmarch in of itself actually held people, and this update kept about 40,000 players, dropped to about 30,000 before Destiny 2's final significant update. Now, as of that point, I believe majority of the players then left to go play Destiny 2's final update. However, I do think that is significant, because that proves that people do want to play the game. Additionally, when we got the update of Vault Breakers, which was just basically single player, or well, single team Cryo Archive, there was also a jump to about 12,000 players. Additionally, the game has very high level monetization since it costs money to outright buy the game. And of course, the cosmetics cost money as well. And I haven't really gone into a lobby where I have not seen at least one person with some paid cosmetic. Meaning that Bungie probably isn't making, it probably isn't losing money at the moment. This all leads into the big problem of just really, I guess, how do you view the situation? I mean, obviously we can go glass half, and this could be considered glass half full view, but I could also go glass half empty and say that it's just cooked, right? Obviously player counts are going down, the game does have problems, but at the same time, I think that's the other flip side. It's like, if the game is in a keep the game alive sort of mode until we can get significant enough content in, I wouldn't argue that's a bad place. Pulling potentially 20k players per day in total is not bad by any real stretch of the imagination, like especially for an extraction shooter that is very divisive with how it's designed. The additional point here I'll put forwards, I guess, is that like obviously I don't really think anybody's got perfect numbers, nor does anyone have perfect data. And that's something I'm willing to accept as well as my point. So I'm not going to say that my arguments are 100% accurate or 100% all the time, right? Like, and that's the thing. As I said before, when I started off, I do have some potential risks, and there are some things that I might have misinterpreted or might just have because of human error. And that is obviously a factor that you have to put into this. But that also being said, again, Dad's Marathon is also a bit weird because it's based off of Cruise Online. They just could, the moment when I went through and did the tally, simply, there could have just been more people playing PC at that point. More PC players online at that point than there were console. But it doesn't mean that there's not necessarily goes back the other way. And that's the thing about this, right? It's like, and that's the big issue I have with this whole talk. It's that whilst, yes, on one hand, the data could be misinterpreted one way, I guess the other side is the data could be misinterpreted the other. And coming back to, I guess, that key point I made initially about Paul Tassi, it's like the reality is over time the data can change. Over 5 months, which is quite a while, the balance can shift. If you've got 80,000 players and let's say 10,000 players on one version, the reality is that you've got somewhere in the vicinity of, I mean, the reality is at the end of the day, you've got somewhere in the vicinity of a 50-50 split now, if that, because it would likely maintain a similar amount. And that's the thing about Marathon. I think it's that it's overwhelmingly positive on Steam, where you actually have to play the game to actually review it, which is a huge thing that a lot of people don't like about the game, and this is one of the reasons why Metacritic is completely useless as a perspective to actually analyze the game. And it's just that sort of point I would argue. Like, this game is fairly solid in its current place. Like, it's not doing great, but I think it also has that potential to come back, and that's really where I'd leave it. But yeah, overall, I'd say it's about 50-50 split. I mean, 40-51% split, really. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, if you found it helpful in any regard, I guess leave a like, subscribe or something. It's greatly appreciated. And I'll catch you on the next one. Thank you very much. Goodbye.